Da 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 da. Welcome back to disenFRIENDSchised, where we dissect friends one episode at a time and call out the grief that nobody names. I'm Karen Bulinski Mathison, founder of TheNakedGrief, a published author with lived experience, years of education, and a grief coach. I'm also the host of this podcast, disenFRIENDSchised, where we look at disenfranchised grief through the lens of friends. If you're new here and you're like, wait, what is disenfranchised grief? Well, it's everything other than death. It's stuff you don't get casseroles for. Today is season 2, episode 7, the one where Ross finds out. This episode is yet another masterclass in grief. It's what happens when grief moves too fast, when you try to outrun your feelings before you've actually felt them, and when the thing that you've been holding on to finally explodes in a way that you cannot control. But it's also about something darker. It's what happens when relief overrides everything else, including your own integrity. The setup for the episode. Rachel finds out that Ross and Julie are getting a cat together. They're not just hanging out anymore. They're not just dating. They're getting a cat. In relationship language, that's a declaration. That's serious. That's a future. And Rachel watches it happen in real time at Central Perk, and something inside her breaks. She can't breathe. She can't stay at work. She can't stay focused, so she leaves in the middle of her shift. Monica tries to help. She sets her up on a date with Michael, a guy who just went through a divorce and seems like he understands loss. Rachel agrees. She's going to move forward. She's going to get over this. She's going to be fine. Except she's not fine. And that's the first grief we need to name. Premature closure grief. Rachel's trying to move through her feelings before she's actually felt them. She's on a date with Michael, but she's not there. She's not present. She's spiraling about the cat. How long do cats live? Do they live a long time? Is this a lifetime commitment? She's asking Michael about cats like the answer will somehow make sense of what's happening with Ross. And Michael is patient. He's been through divorce. He gets it. And he tells her what she needs is closure. He tells her that that's how you move forward and move on. You get closure. You process it. You move through. Rachel hears closure and something clicks. That's what she needs. That's the answer. If she can get closure, she can be over this. She can move on. She can be fine. So she does what Rachel does when she's desperate and not thinking clearly. She grabs the phone from the table next to her after a little plea bargaining, and she calls Ross, and she leaves him a message. Ross, hi, it's Rachel. I'm just calling to say that everything's fine, and I'm really happy for you and your cat, who, by the way, I think you should name Michael. And, you see there, I'm thinking of names, so obviously I am over you. I am over you. And that, my friend, is what they call closure. And then she snaps the phone shut and drops it in a glass of water. And let that sink in. She doesn't hang up gently. She doesn't put it down. She drops it in water. That's not closure. That's destruction. That's her trying to destroy the evidence of what she just did. The desperation she just broadcast. The lie she just told, while also exposing her true feelings. Sort of. It is a lie, and she knows it. And the moment she hangs up or drops the phone, she realizes she's just made a massive mistake. The humiliation. Rachel goes back to her date with Michael, and she's sitting there knowing what she just did. She called the man that she never got to have anything with while on a date with another man, and just told the man that she's been obsessing over that she's over him when she's not. She grabbed someone else's phone. She left a drunken, rambling message. She dropped the phone in water like she was trying to erase the whole thing. And that's not closure. That's chaos. That's grief moving so fast it becomes self-sabotage. And then we have Ross's grief. Let's talk about what happens on Ross's side, because this is where the episode gets really layered. Ross has been in love with Rachel since before we meet them, the whole gang in the pilot episode. He's been in love with her since the 9th grade, and he says later. And he's been waiting. He's been patient. He's been watching her date other people, and he's been holding on to hope that maybe someday, somehow, it'll be his turn. But here's the thing. Ross knows what it feels like to be cheated on. In the pilot, we meet him as his wife Carol is moving her stuff out. Their marriage is ending because Carol cheated. She found someone else. She moved on. And Ross was left holding the grief of infidelity, of betrayal, of being replaced. So when Julie comes along, Ross tries to do the right thing. He moves forward. He gets a girlfriend. He talks about getting a cat with her. He's building a life that doesn't revolve around Rachel Green. He's trying to be the kind of person who doesn't get left behind, who doesn't pine, who moves on like a healthy adult. And then he hears Rachel's message. And we have all kinds of grief hit all at once. Bam! Shock grief. Ross finds out that Rachel has feelings for him. Not had, has. Present tense. She's been feeling this the whole time while he was waiting. She was waiting too. But now it's too late. Then he's got anger grief. Ross is furious. Not at Rachel exactly, at the situation, at the timing, at the fact that she's telling him this now, when he's finally moved on. He's angry at himself for not saying something sooner. He's angry at Rachel for saying something too late. He's angry that the thing he wanted for so long is being dangled in front of him when he's already committed to someone else. Betrayal grief. There's a layer here of feeling betrayed by the universe, by timing, by the fact that they were both carrying this and neither of them said anything. Ross had a year. They hung out every night and he never found the right time. Rachel never said anything either. And now they're both paying the price for that silence. And then we have conflict grief. Ross is caught between two versions of himself. There's the Ross who's been in love with Rachel since 9th grade, who's dreamed about this moment, who would do anything to be with her. And there's the Ross who's with Julie, who's happy, who's moved on, and now he has to choose. And there's no good choice. Either he stays with Julie and loses Rachel again, or he leaves Julie and proves that his feelings for her were always more important than his integrity. And then there's the resentment grief. There's also the grief of feeling like Rachel has had no right to tell him this. He's moved on. He's made a choice. And now he's coming back. She's coming back and upending everything. What gives her the right to do this? He's been doing the work of getting over her, and now she's making the work meaningless. So Ross leaves to go get a cat with Julie. He was picking up some cat supplies from Monica's apartment, Monica and Rachel's apartment, and he goes. Further into the episode, we've got the confrontation. Ross goes to Central Perk after hours. Rachel's closing up, and he tells her, "I didn't get a cat." That's not what he means. What he means is, "I heard your message, I know, and I'm angry." And Rachel knows it. She's been waiting for this moment, and now that it's here, she's terrified. They fight. Really fight about timing, about missed moments, about a year of hanging out every night and never finding the right time. Ross says he's been putting away his feelings since 9th grade. He's gotten pretty damn good at it. And Rachel says, "You think it's easy for me to see you with Julie?" And Ross says, "Then you should have said something before I met her." And Rachel says, "I didn't know then. And how come you never said anything to me?" And Ross says, "There was never a good time." And Rachel says, "Right, you only had a year. We only hung out every night." This is two people grieving the same loss from opposite sides. Rachel is grieving the loss of the possibility that she didn't take. Ross is grieving the loss of the possibility possibility that he didn't take with Julie, only to find out that the real possibility was always Rachel. And then we have the breaking point. Ross says the point is, I don't need this now, okay? It's too late. I'm with somebody else. I'm happy. This ship has sailed. And Rachel says, yeah, what are you saying? You just sort of put away feelings or whatever the hell it was that you felt for me? And Ross says, hey, I've been doing that since the 9th grade. I've gotten pretty damn good at it. And he storms out, and Rachel locks the door, and she sits down and she starts sobbing. Not quietly, not in a way she can hide from. She's alone in Central Perk, and she's crying because she's lost him again, or maybe for the first time, because maybe she never really had him. But Ross doesn't stay gone. He comes back, and he looks at her through the glass. And when she sees him, she gets up and tries to open the door, but she's shaking so badly, she can't figure out which lock to open. And Ross says, try the bottom one, and she does, and the doors burst open, and it's pouring rain outside. And he grabs her, and they get lost in each other, and we have their first kiss, and it is epic. But here's what we need to understand about this moment. This is a limbic override. Let me define that for you. The limbic system is the part of your brain responsible for emotions and survival responses. When it takes control over your rational thought and decision making, when it overrides your prefrontal cortex, the part that thinks about consequences, that's a limbic override. It's when your nervous system hijacks your ability to think straight. And that's what happens to Ross in this moment. He's standing outside Central Perk. He sees Rachel. She's crying. She's alone. And the thing he wanted for years, the only thing he's wanted for years, is suddenly, finally, right there. She wants him. She's been wanting him. The relief of that knowledge is so overwhelming that it creates tunnel vision. He can only see Rachel. He can't see Julie waiting at home. He can't think about the fact that he's in a relationship. He can't access that part of his brain that remembers what it felt like to be cheated on, to be betrayed, to have his wife leave him for someone else. All he can feel is the impulse, the compulsion, the momentary amnesia of consequences. All he can feel is the relief rush of finally getting what he's been waiting for. And so they kiss. And in that moment, Ross becomes someone he swore he'd never be. Someone who cheats. Someone who hurts another person without thinking. Someone who lets desire override integrity. The betrayal grief and the integrity grief. This is where we need to name two different griefs because they're both happening at the same time. Betrayal grief for Julie. Julie doesn't know it yet, but she's been betrayed. Ross kissed Rachel while he was still with her. He made a commitment to her and he broke it in a moment of relief and desire. Julie will grieve the loss of this relationship that she thought she had, a trust that was broken, and the fact that she was never really the priority, a reason why she always felt intimidated by Rachel. And then we have the integrity grief for Ross. In that moment of clarity for him that will actually come later, Ross grieves the loss of who he thought he was. He's the guy who was cheated on. He's the guy who knows what that feels like. And now he's the guy who did it. He's become the thing he hated. He's lost his own integrity in a moment of limbic override. And why this moment matters. So here's the thing. The audience doesn't even feel that grief in this moment. The audience feels the relief. We've been waiting for this kiss since the pilot. We've been rooting for Ross and Rachel. We've been secretly hoping that somehow, some way, they end up together, despite all these obstacles and Italian guys and blackouts and cats and women they meet in China. that they'd finally end up together. And when they finally kiss, when that tension is finally broken, we forget all about Julie. We forget about the consequences. We forget that Ross just cheated because the relief is so powerful. The narrative shift is so complete that in this moment, Ross and Rachel become the couple. They're not together yet, but from this moment on, everyone is rooting for them as a unit. Julie becomes the obstacle, the thing in the way, the person we've collectively hoping that he'll leave. And that's the genius and the tragedy of this episode. It's the moment when the show pivots. It's the moment when Ross and Rachel stop being two people with unrequited feelings and become the central love story of the entire series. And it's built on a moment of infidelity, a moment where Ross's limbic system overrides his integrity, when relief overrides consequence, where desire overrides everything else. And what this episode names is premature closure grief, trying to move through your feelings before you've actually felt them. Anticipatory grief, watching someone move forward without you, knowing you're losing the possibility of what could have been. Shame grief, the humiliation of being transparent about your feelings, of being obvious, of being desperate. Rejection grief, confessing and getting silence, getting anger, getting it's too late. Abandonment grief, being left alone without an answer, without acknowledgement. Conflict grief, being caught between two versions of yourself with no good choice. Resentment grief, feeling like someone has no right to upend your life, even if they're the person you've been waiting for. The almost timing grief, being one conversation away from a different life, 1 year away from a different ending. The grief of realizing that I've been doing it since ninth grade means you've spent years not being honest, not taking chances, not risking the thing that matters most. Limbic override grief, the grief of becoming someone you swore you'd never be, of letting desire and relief override your own integrity. Betrayal grief, the grief of being the person who cheats after you've been the person who was cheated on. Integrity grief, the loss of who you thought you were in a single moment of impulse. The episode is the pivot point. It's where the show stops being about two people with unrequited feelings and becomes about a couple that the entire audience has been rooting for all along. Even though that couple is built on a moment of infidelity, on a limbic override, on a choice that Ross will have to reckon with. And that's the real grief of the episode. The grief of discovering that the thing you've wanted for so long comes at a cost you didn't know you'd have to pay for. I know that this is one of those epic episodes, the iconic framing of the entire series. And there's so much grief named in this. If it resonates with you, it's the grief that we acknowledge at The Naked Grief. And what you'll find here is a private, judgment-free space to process what's changed, practical tools, prompts, and guidance that you can use right away, multiple styles of support so you can choose what fits and switch if you need to. A path to find your footing, one small step at a time. If you're not ready for therapy or coaching yet, but you know you need something, you're in the right place. You can learn more and check it out at TheNakedGrief.com. And as for Ross and Rachel, there were key coaching moments that could have completely changed the face of this entire series had they been addressed in real time instead of in heated emotional opportunity. If Rachel had named her feelings before she tried to manufacture closure on that date with Michael, she wouldn't have spiraled. If Ross had been honest about what he was carrying before he decided to get a cat with Julie was the answer, he doesn't build a whole relationship trying to outrun his feelings for Rachel. If either of them had done one uncomfortable, honest conversation with each other before this breaking point, this whole episode wouldn't have become an emotional car crash. But here's what I do want to credit them for. They finally put all the cards on the table. They stopped hinting. They stopped avoiding. They stopped pretending. And yes, the delivery was messy and emotional, and it came at a cost, but they were fully transparent with each other. And that transparency, that willingness to finally say the thing out loud, their true feelings, that's the turning point. That's the shift. That's what makes everything that comes next possible. So the coaching moment isn't just about what could have been different. It's about honoring the courage it took to finally be honest, even when it was ugly, even when it was maybe too late, even when it hurt. Sometimes the hard conversation comes after the damage is done, but it still matters and it still changes everything. So join us next week for season 2, episode 8. And until then, da 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 da